Hello and welcome along. So today we're going to talk about the Furious Abyss and its significance in the Horus Heresy. So the Furious Abyss was a enormous battleship that was created by the Wordbearers in secret. It took a long time to build. So battleships in the Warhammer 40k universe are massive, many kilometers long, and they take many years to build, so decades even. And the Furious Abyss is exceptionally large, so it's much bigger than anything else that was around. So the Wordbearers have a very specific task in mind for this ship, and that is the destruction of Macragge, essentially. So they want to use it as part of their revenge that they've been plotting against the Ultramarines, who they have a very personal hatred of due to the Ultramarines humiliating them on the orders of the Emperor on the planet of Monarcha, which was a planet that the Wordbearers had brought in under compliance, but they had sort of imposed kind of religious ideas of worshipping the Emperor onto these people, which they tended to do on all of their planets at this time in their history. And the Emperor basically had reached the final straw, so he decides he's going to punish them by humiliating them, and he does this with the help of the Ultramarines. So he basically has them watch while he destroys the capital city, and he even has the population watch this happen, and many of them are blinded by this. I think actually many of them die. It's a pretty brutal way of humiliating the Wordbearers, but it's the Emperor kind of felt like this was the kind of had to be a big, bold, sort of dramatic statement to get Lorgar to kind of accept that he was wrong. So because the Wordbearers blame the Ultramarines for this, they have decided to plan a way of getting vengeance on them. And over several decades, after they've started on their path towards chaos, they plan this attack on the Ultramarines. Now, part of that plan is an attack on Calth, which I've done a video on before, so you can take a look at that video for more details. But the second part of the plan is that while all the Ultramarines are on Calth, or the vast majority of them are, including Guilliman himself, Macragge will be effectively almost undefended. And this ship is designed to be so massive that even on its own, it can overwhelm the defenses of Macragge. And the idea is that that ship will go to Macragge while everybody else is on Calth on the false pretenses of meeting up with the Wordbearers. So this ship has to be built in secret, because if people knew about it, then it would be highly suspicious, because it's not just the sort of thing that even Space Marine legions do, is just build some enormous ship that's bigger than anything else that exists. So they achieve this by, one, using their contacts within the Mechanicum that they've developed. These are the parts of the Mechanicum that will become the Dark Mechanicum. So they're the kind of like, they're traitors in waiting, essentially, and they're doing the work for the Wordbearers completely in secret on a moon called Thule, which is out in the outer parts of the solar system. I think it's in orbit around Saturn or Jupiter, but it's away from their normal shipyards on Mars. And once they build this ship, the ship sets sail into the warp on its mission. They destroy the moon. So everyone on that moon who knew about it dies. And so this is kind of a mysterious thing, and as far as the rest of the Imperium are concerned, it's like, oh, there was a big explosion, some sort of industrial accident in this moon. No one really knows what was going on there anyway, so it's not that meaningful. So that way, no information about this ship being built can get out. So there's a few people right up at the top of the Mechanicum obviously know about this. There will be traitors at some point, but obviously they're not going to let anything out. But the ones that might have, the lower level people that could have been leaks, are all dead, so they can't. And anybody else who knows about it is on the ship itself, so they can't release the information while they're contained within the ship. So this ship is on this mission to go and attack Macragge right at the beginning of the heresy. Now, I should say at this point, the Ultramarines obviously are unaware of the heresy happening. However, the heresy has started. So the events of Istvan 3, where the traitor legions have purged their sort of loyalist members, and the events of Istvan 5, where there was an attempt to attack Horus and his allies by the remaining loyalist legions, has happened, and they've been ambushed. And so the three loyalist legions that were there have been decimated. That's all happened, but that information hasn't got out to the Ultramarines. So they're still under the impression that everything's normal. And the last orders they've received from Horus is that they should meet up with the word bearers on Calth to muster to go on another campaign. Now, the word bearers then managed to get all the way from the Isfan system all the way to Calth without this information getting out, because essentially they have, because of their alliances with the powers of the warp, they can move through the warp much more quickly and easily than the loyalists, and they can control even the information being transmitted by astropaths. So you've got to remember that when an astropath sends a message, it's not a very simple thing. It's not like a radio message. It's very much more based on sort of images and emotions, so feelings. And so when an astropath receives a message, they kind of take all these images and these feelings, and they kind of interpret them as a kind of coherent message. So the powers of the warp basically can make it harder for an astropath to get this message through, so they can reduce the range at which the message is sent. They can also distort the message, make it harder to interpret, and so on. Whereas the traitors have a very clear line of communication through the warp, which they can use to speed up everything they're doing. It might seem odd that the Ultramarines don't know anything about the events of Isfan 3 and 5, even though obviously most other people know about Isfan 3, because that's why Isfan 5 happens, because it's the reaction of the Loyalists against what's happened at Isfan 3. So even though this planning and so on has gone on for this event to go and get retribution, or to bring Horus under control, amongst the other legions, the Ultramarines are still completely oblivious. So this means that the word bearers have the advantage of surprise, but they also need to keep this massive super ship secret to keep that element of surprise, because if it's so unusual that it could bring, and if the fact that it's heading in the direction of Macragge would pique the interests of the Ultramarines, and they might put two and two together and think, hold on, this is a bit weird. A secret ship heading directly from Macragge that's bigger than anything ever built before. And then even if they don't know whose it is, they'll just be ready. They'll be thinking, okay, we have to prepared for something going wrong. Obviously, the Ultramarines famously are obsessive about preparation, about thinking through all the possibilities of what might happen and preparing plans to account for them. Unfortunately for the word bearers, as this massive ship is on its journey towards Macragge, it randomly comes across an Ultramarines ship. I think it's the Fist of Macragge. So it has to destroy that ship, because if it doesn't, word's going to get out that it exists. And as I said, that might lead to some preparations for an attack happening. So it destroys the ship, but as it destroys the ship, the Ultramarine ship is able to get a brief message out via their astropath to a nearby space station. Well, at least it's picked up by astropaths on a space station where it was heading to. Now, you don't actually direct a communication through astropaths to a specific location as such. It just kind of goes out there into the warp, and people can pick it up if they've got the ability to do so. But this space station is relatively close, because that's where the ship was going to be going, and therefore it is picked up here before anybody else. Now, the message that comes through is a bit garbled. Doesn't make a great deal of sense, but it gives some impression that there's some danger towards Macragge, and obviously the ship itself has been destroyed, and so the people that pick it up happen to be some Ultramarine. The astropaths tell them on the station that this is the message that they've got, and the Ultramarines there is an honor guard, basically. So a squad of Ultramarines that have been out on a special mission, to probably doing some diplomatic work or something, escort some high-level officials or whatever, or just representing the Legion somewhere out in the wider universe. The Ultramarines are commanded by Sergeant Cestus, but I believe he's a sergeant. I'm not actually sure. He should be, he's in command of the squad, but couldn't actually find out what rank he was. But he is a classic Ultramarines officer type. He's a very efficient, organised guy, and he's also very keen on his duty and doing his duty. And so he figures out, well, Ultramarine ship's been destroyed, Macragge might be in danger, I have to do something. So he manages to persuade other Astartes from different chapters on the station, who are kind of a random eclectic bunch, to join with him, and not really under his command as such, but kind of under his guidance, to go and find out what's going on. This group are a kind of unusual blend of individuals, because the space station they're on is a kind of more of a way station where you might stop off if you're on a trip from one place within the Imperium to another. And so they're not there for any specific mission as such. They've just ended up there while they're waiting to move on to somewhere else. And so the group consists of Cestus and his honor guard of Ultramarines, Skrull, who is a world eater, and he's got about, I think it's 20 world eaters, so a couple of squads. It's like a veteran sergeant, I think. Then you've got Sturmdreng, who is a space wolf, and he's got a couple of squads of Bloodclaws. So Bloodclaws are the kind of the junior members of the space wolves, so the equivalent to scouts in other legions, but they are specialist assault squads because that's the space wolf way. You get someone new in and you say go and attack those people, and if you do a good job and you survive, you might get promoted later on. Most of them probably die, I would imagine. And he's a wolf guard, so he's one of the elite of the Space Wolf Legion. So he's obviously like a very skilled veteran. And then you've got Motep, who is a Thousand Sons. Again, rank-wise, it's a bit unclear, but he's not considered near the top of the Legion. He's somewhere in the middle ranking. So he's obviously relatively senior because he actually has his own ship, which he's in command of, which is quite a big ship, and has several, I think it's a few companies of Spire Guard on board, which are the kind of the elite auxiliaries of the Thousand Sons. And he's got command over the whole ship. He's on his own. There's no one else there. Another Thousand Sons. So he obviously has some rank, but Thousand Sons do seem to tend to be kind of a work above their rank level. So even a Thousand Sons sergeant often does things you would think a more senior officer would do, like command a whole ship or a group of auxiliaries or whatever, because I think a Thousand Sons generally are better leaders, more knowledgeable, and obviously they have great more awareness of what's going on because of their higher levels of both intelligence and, if they are psychers, which obviously many of them are, their connection to the warp giving them some level of precognition, even if they aren't members of the Corvidae who specialise in precognition. So they do generally take on leadership roles more so than some of the other legions. So that's the big group. So Cestus has put together, which is all the Astartes on the station, and he decides he's going to have to go and find out what happened to the Fist of Macragge, because that's kind of the only clue they really have about what might be this terrible event facing the planet of Macragge. Let's not get the ship and the planet mixed up. Now, also docked at the station, there's some Imperial naval force. So there's I think it's a Grand Cruiser, so it's a big Grand Cruiser, and an admiral in command of that, and there's a carrier, and I think it's 4 escort vessels, probably kind of like destroyers, frigates, or something. He's a very persuasive man. So, and he's an Astarte, and generally people, even the Imperial military, kind of do what they're told by it from Astartes, even if the ranks kind of don't match up. So this admiral basically takes orders from him, decides that it's important enough a mission, and that he's has enough authority from just being an Astarte, essentially, that they will follow him. So he commandeers the ship, essentially. And as I said, Motep has his own ship, so he joins the fleet as well. So you've got this fleet of 7 vessels who then go off, investigate what happened to the Fist of Macragge. So they go to the last known location and start looking for it. Now, while they're there, they encounter this word-bearer ship, the Furious Abyss. As soon as the commander of Furious Abyss, which is, I think he's called Zadkiel, is a word-bearer. They've all got weird names. He obviously wants to destroy them because it's a threat to the plan going through. So they go into a big battle, big space battle ensues, and being a massive ship, and like so massive, and obviously it's relatively new. Most of these other ships that they consist of this sort of allied fleet are quite old and not the greatest. He destroys most of them. So in the battle, he manages to destroy, I think, 3 of the escorts, Motep's ship, and I think the carrier is destroyed as well. Yeah, and most of the fighters that are on that carrier. So that leaves the main ship with this Grand Cruiser, the Admiral's flagship, and 1 escort. But unfortunately, that 1 escort gets possessed by demons. So the demons are then brought onto the main ship when the escort docks for repairs after the battle. So during the battle, Motep manages to damage the Furious Abyss enough that it has to pull out basically decides to pull out of the battle and goes back into the warp to escape. So it damages the cooling system, which means that it will overheat if it fires its main weapon or something like that. I think Motep does quite a good job as basically with his ship to save the rest of them. And he kind of sacrifices his ship to cause this damage, and then he gets out on a savior pod, so a lifeboat base, but I think he's the only one who survives from his own ship. So the Grand Cruiser, the sort of flagship of their ragtag fleet, is the Wrathful, and the remaining escort is called the Fireblade. And so this escort, as I said, has got possessed by demons unknowingly to those on board the Wrathful. As the Fierce Abyss has gone into the warp, they decide to dock Fireblade and repair it, and the demons come on board the Wrathful, and so the crew have to fight off these demons. This is a pretty frantic fight that is kind of going on, quite easily could have gone the wrong way. And I think this is probably the first time that any of these people have really seen demons. So this isn't a common occurrence at this point. So as I said, really much the very beginning of the Horus Heresy, it's just not a normal thing you see. So even Astartes are kind of taken aback by what's going on here. Like, what are these creatures? How do you deal with them? And so on. And not only are there demons on the ship, there are also a demon of some quite considerable power has overtaken the actual Fireblade itself, this escort vessel, and possessed it and become a kind of a semi-living ship. It's now attacking them. This ship seems to be very hard to damage. It's very hard for them to manage to destroy it. And so Motep has to use his psychic powers to destroy this ship. And he damages it enough, so that the entity that's possessing it, enough so that the ship can be then destroyed by conventional weapons. And if he doesn't do this, it's very clear that they're going to lose, and that the Wrathful will be destroyed, and they'll all die, and that's the end of it. The Furious Abyss will get away. So it's a key moment, because if the Furious Abyss gets away, it goes and destroys Makarg, and that would be a massive blow to the Ultramarines. Even though at Calth they managed to survive, well, at least enough of them managed to survive, and Guilliman survives, that they can continue the war. If they'd lost Makarg, that would have been a huge blow to them, and plus they would have still had this ship to deal with, the Furious Abyss. So this can't happen. So obviously, if this key turning point in the story is very relevant, because it all really comes down to Motep destroying this possessed escort ship and helping them drive off the other demons that are on board the vessel. If he doesn't do that, and if he's not there, or he decides not to do it, it's a Thousand Sun. So bear in mind, he could have already turned traitor, as it were, but the Thousand Sons aren't really traitors, so they don't really know. They become kind of traitors, funneled down a route to being traitors, but they aren't actively choosing to be traitors. And so as far as he's aware, he's still a loyalist Astarte doing his job for the Imperium. Or he sees this weird ship, and they're under attack. He fights the ship. There's this weird these demons come out of the warp. He has a bit of more knowledge of what they could be, because he understands the warp more than the others, and so he helps just defeat them. And he has some kind of inkling of that something's not quite right in the wider Imperium, but I don't think he doesn't know at this point exactly what's happened, or what his legion's doing, or anything else. He doesn't know about the burning of Prospero and things like this. So it's really just down to him as an individual making choices in the moment of like what he thinks is the right thing to do. So he decides that this is the right thing to do, even though he's been treated really badly up to this point by the other Astartes, particularly the Space Wolves. So the Space Wolves hate him from in the instant they meet him, and they treat him very, very badly and are constantly rude to him, threaten him all the time. They're just arseholes, basically. Now, this kind of is explained later as being some effect of the warp that's making people unusually grumpy, but I can put it like that. But it is playing on the fact that they just don't like him anyway. They really don't. That's deep down within the Space Wolves, this hatred for him. And now this is all made worse by the fact that now he's revealed his psychic abilities. So obviously they know he's a Psyker because he's a Thousand Sun, and they assume he's a Psyker. But they haven't seen him actually use his powers up to this point. And at this point, the Edict of Nicaea is still in place. So the banning of using psychic abilities is still in place. And now, during the heresy, each legion basically made its own choice to give up that. They basically went against the banning through their own decision that it was just impractical to keep it going once the heresy had been revealed, and that they found out that psychic abilities are really useful in fighting demons. He hasn't been given permission, though, to do this. And so, obviously, normally this happens when one of the Primarch of the Legion realizes that this is probably not practical to keep the ban, and they say, okay, we'll bring the librarians back. They can now use psychic abilities. But obviously these Astartes are all isolated from their Primarchs. There's no one there to give them permission to break the ban. And so he just does it off of his own back. Now, obviously, we know that the Thousand Sons in the wider story have already done this. They never really stopped using their psychic abilities, even after Nicaea. They just carried on. But they did it in relative secrecy. They wouldn't just do it openly in front of others. In this case, even though he saved their lives and saved this mission, he's immediately turned on by the others. Now, Cestus, the Ultramarine, is relatively neutral on this. He's kind of like, well, you shouldn't have done it, but you kind of had to do it, so I understand. And the Skrull and his World Eaters, I can't actually remember what they think. I don't do much. I don't think they particularly care. But obviously, the Space Wolves are extremely unhappy, and they would like to kill him. But so, as a compromise, he's put in prison. Basically, he's put in the brig of the ship. Now, this is obviously a mistake because he's their most capable individual in their fight against any war entities, and he also is a very capable individual in general. So he's very good at his knowledge, his understanding, his tactical sense. He is a very useful contributor to the team, this eclectic team that's been put together. So locking him away isn't a good plan, but it kind of has to happen because if they don't, then he'll probably be attacked by the Space Wolves. Well, I think almost certain. And so he'll probably end up dead. A lot of them will end up dead. The mission won't work very well. So Cestus has to make the decision. So he puts him in the brig for now. As I said before, they've got their lucky break where they managed to hit the Furious Abyss and cause cooling system damage. So that means the Furious Abyss can't really go very far. So it gets away from the site of the battle, and it goes to a space station to get repairs. So Cestus basically orders, once all this business with the possessed ship has been dealt with, he orders the Wrathful to pursue it and try and locate. So the Furious Abyss has had to dock at a space station to get repairs because of this damage to the coolant system, and Cestus takes this as an opportunity to assault the ship while it's less defendable. So he plans this attack where they're going to try and board the ship, basically, and fight their way through to the command deck and kill the commanders. And Zagkiel of the Wordbearers gets warning of this, basically, through some sort of warp entity. So he decides, well, this is a good way to kill them. So instead of defeating them in a space battle, I can let them board, or at least start to board the space station, and when they do, I'll ambush them and wipe them out. So he prepares an ambush, and he orders his subordinate, it's Ultis, or Ultis, how you pronounce it, I don't know. But he's basically, Ultis is a wordbearer who's a particularly scheming wordbearer. Most wordbearers are pretty scheming, but this guy's done it so much that his boss doesn't like it, and he thinks he's going to probably overtake him, probably stab him in the back at some point, because wordbearers have a habit of stabbing each other in the back. So he orders another one of his lieutenants, Balanos, who's more of a not particularly bright and more of a world eater type character, a very brutal assault captain, to kill him during the ambush, so that he can't point the fingers at him for doing it. So this is all going on within the ambush. This is like their plan. Well, while the ambush is going on, you kill him, and then it'll all be okay. So the ambush occurs, and the loyalist force splits into two. So half goes off to fight its way onto the Furious Abyss. So that's the World Eaters under Skrull and the remaining Ultramarines under it's Antigus, I think it's pronounced. He's the subordinate to Cestus. And so Cestus has remained on the Wrathful to command the operation because he's persuaded that he's just too important to be risked. Because if he goes, the whole mission will kind of fail because no one will be able to hold them together, essentially. And Motep is still in jail, so he can't get out. He's in the brig. So you've got Cestus and Motep, probably their most useful two members of this group, are not able to take part. And then the others are split into two, as I said. So the other part of that group are the Space Wolves under Sturmdrank. So he basically fights the ambushing force, allowing the others to try and assault the ship. Now, he does quite a good job, and he manages to kill Balanos and capture Ultis. Yeah. His blood claws managed to kill all the other wordbearers. So that's in the ambush. So that's quite successful. But unfortunately, the other half are almost wiped out on their assault on the ship, and leaving only I think it's three World Eaters, Skrull and Antigus, to get onto the Furious Abyss. And they are very quickly killed after this, down to the point of only Skrull surviving. And he basically he hides on the ship and we'll come back to him shortly. So at this point, the mission has failed essentially, and the remaining the Space Wolves have to decide to go back onto the Wrathful because the mission can't continue. But they do have something to show for it. They have killed the ambushing word bearers, one of the major leaders of the word bearers, and captured another. So it's they've done pretty well. So at this point, the Furious Abyss escapes back into the warp again, and so Cestus orders the Wrathful to pursue it. Now, while they're pursuing it through the warp, they have the opportunity to try and get some information from Ultis, this subordinate of Zadkiel, who've been captured by the Space Wolves. The Space Wolves, obviously, doing what they do, they try and beat it out of him. So Sturmdrang tries to kind of torture this information out of him, but the word bearers, they said, well, for a start, he's an Astarte. It's very hard to beat an Astarte to the point that they give you information. And as a word bearer, he's a fanatic. He's just not going to give up this information, so it's not working. And so Cestus decides, well, I'm going to have to get Motep to use his psychic powers to bring this, get the information out of him. So he does this, and it works. However, at the same time, the word bearers have sent demons to attack the ship, and they manage to penetrate the Gellerfield of the Wrathful, and they start attacking the ship. And again, no one's particularly effective at fighting them except for Motep. So Motep manages to basically rescue the remainder of the Ultramarines Honor Guard who remained on the Wrathful. This kind of battle, although he's successful and winning, it renders him unconscious for us temporarily. While he's unconscious, he can't tell anybody what he learned from the mind of Ultis when he was extracting the information from him. And so this leaves the protagonists on board the ship, on board the Wrathful, at loggerheads. So you've got Sturmdrang, he's enraged that Cestus has allowed Motep to use his psychic abilities. And Cestus, being an Ultramarine, is very practical. He's like, this is what we had to do to get the information. It's clear that his psychic abilities are useful to us, and he's helped us. He's not shown any signs of treachery, etc. They're at a standoff. They can't really agree with each other. And so Sturmdrang decides he's going to challenge Cestus to a duel, which, he's probably got a pretty good chance of winning. And if he does win it, if Motep's unconscious, you can just kill him as he is, and he will have, he'll have got what he wants. The mission, however, would obviously fail at this point, because without Cestus and Motep, there's probably no chance that they're going to be able to do anything else. But Sturmdrang's not really thinking about that. He's very single-minded. He hates Motep. He hates the fact that he's a psyker, and he hates even more the fact that he's broken the Edict of Nicaea. And so Cestus is now allowing this to happen, and so this can't continue. So in his mind, he needs to stop it in the only way he knows how, which is violence. So they set to have the duel, and somehow Cestus manages to win, very narrowly, but he does win. So because he's won the honor duel, he effectively has regained command over the situation, and the Space Wolves have to do what he says. So once Motep comes back to consciousness, he informs Cestus of the plan of the word bearers. So this plan turns out to be essentially what they want to do is use the Furious Abyss to destroy one of the moons of Macragge, which will then create a debris field which will screen them as they come into the system. They'll be hidden behind it. Then they will virus bomb Macragge. So Macragge will be completely uninhabitable, and all of its population will be dead. Obviously, Cestus can't allow this to happen, so he decides, what we're going to do is use our ship, the Wrathful, on a suicide mission. While the Wrathful is providing a distraction and gets pummeled to death by this massive battleship, the Furious Abyss, the remaining Astartes, minus Motep, who has to stay on board the Wrathful, will board it and fight their way to the torpedo deck and detonate the torpedoes, and therefore blow up the ship before it can do any more damage. And obviously they'll all die in the process of doing this, but that's it's worth the sacrifice. So they go ahead with this plan, and it kind of works to start off with, at least. So basically, the Wrathful draws the fire of the Furious Abyss. They launch shuttles to try and board the Abyss, and some of them make it, and most importantly, the ones with all the main characters in makes it. So Cestus and Sturmdrang both make it on board. They set about fighting their way towards the torpedo bay. But they are separated, so they aren't together at this point. So back on board the Wrathful, Motep discovers there's a demon on board, and the demon has killed the bridge crew. He realizes that the demon is not just physically killing people, it's also kind of influencing people's minds, and that essentially it's been turning Sturmdrang against him and Cestus. How much of that is the demon's influence and how much is just the inner sort of hate that Sturmdrang has for Thousand Suns and Psychers in general? It's hard to say, but he works on that that thing that's already there. Basically, the demon magnifies it and makes it easier for it to come out, makes it more the feelings more intense, etc. And so that's kind of why he goes so far in actually fighting Cestus over this. And if it hadn't been for the demon's influence, he probably wouldn't have gone that far. So Motep basically battles this demon, eventually killing it and kind of saving the ship, but not really, because the ship is destroyed anyway by the damage that it's taken from the Furious Abyss. So he dies as one of the great heroes of the Imperium, completely unsung. No one knows about this. Obviously, he's saved the mission on multiple occasions and done things that none of the others could do because of his psychic abilities and so on, and all while being constantly undermined and attacked and derided by the Space Wolves. He never lets that get to him, and he always does what he feels is right for the Imperium, and he in many ways is kind of redeeming his legion, but without really knowing that they need to be redeemed. And yeah, he's another Thousand Son, like Arvida, who I spoke about in the Creation of Janus video, who does incredible things that are critical for the path of the heresy ending with the Imperium winning. Now, back on the Furious Abyss, Sturmdrang is kind of hit by a psychic assault, and he drives him insane and loses control of his temper, and he kills all of his own blood claws. So this is pretty bad, because one, it's weakened his forces, but also he's got this terrible guilt now of murdering his own warriors, the men he's supposed to be mentoring and training and so on, and now he's turned on them and killed them all. He does manage to shake off the effect of this attack at some point, and then he decides he's going to blow up I think it's the plasma generator in the engine deck, but where he encounters Balanos, who was the subordinate who he killed previously on the assault on at the docks. So he's been put into a dreadnought and is given a second chance to kill Sturmdrang. And now, fortunately for Sturmdrang, Skrull, who has been the World Eater, has been living on the ship for these past few days, executing wordbearers wherever he finds them, and sort of basically doing a sort of a Rambo First Blood through the whole ship, appearing out of the darkness to kill someone randomly whenever they get too close to him. And it's so much so he's just become a bogeyman for the wordbearers, and he's just living in the ship, killing them off whenever he feels like it, and they just can't get to him. They can't find him. They can't capture him. They can't get enough numbers in one spot to actually overwhelm him. And most of the time, they just never know where he's going to pop out and kill someone. And so he's been doing this for all this time. The ships have been traveling through the warp, and now he sees his opportunity to sort of help the others as they've boarded the ship. He pops out, and together with Sturmdrang, they manage to defeat Balanos in his dreadnought form. And then they're joined by Cestus, who has also still fighting his way through the ship. He's the last one left. All of his on the guard are dead, and the three of them team up together to go and blow up the plasma generator. And they do kind of successfully do this. Skrull fights his way to the bridge for some reason, and manages to kill some of the wordbearers. In fact, I think he's almost killing them all on the bridge. But then Zadkiel kills him. Unfortunately, that's the end of Skrull. Back in the engine room, Sturmdrang decides he's going to sacrifice himself to blow up the plasma generator. And so he takes a explosive charge, I think a melter charge or something, runs into the generator and blows up. And that's to kill himself. While Cestus then goes towards the shuttle bay, where he finds Zadkiel and trying to escape. So they fight a duel, and Cestus is able to overpower him and kill him eventually. Cuts off his hand and his head, I think. But he drops dead with the wounds that he's taken, and the ship blows up. And that is the end of the Furious Abyss. So the ship is destroyed. Everyone is dead. All the traitors are dead. All the loyalists are dead. The Wrathful's been destroyed already, as I said, and everyone on there is dead. All the demons are banished back to the warp, and it's over. So this was a very significant event, because if the Furious Abyss had managed to successfully complete its mission, Macragge would have been destroyed, completely eliminated, all the population would be dead. The Ultramarines, needing to recover from their massive damage they take at Calth, have, instead of being able to go back to Macragge and regroup and rebuild the Legion, they would be faced with their capital world completely obliterated, all of the support infrastructure and so on gone. And they still have the Furious Abyss to face, which probably would have been enough on its own to eliminate the rest of their fleet. And in many ways, it's a tragedy, because all of the heroes die. But this is Warhammer 40,000, isn't it? It's grim dark. So all of the combatants die. No one really knows what they did for the Imperium, or in facing the very early stages of the heresy, and they probably never get recognised for it. So there you go. Don't volunteer for anything. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next time.